In this video today, I want to address a topic that is very pertinent to our culture, and that is the relationship between science and religion. It's very common today to hear that science and religion are opposed to one another, or they're incompatible. And this supposed conflict between science and religion is complete garbage. Over the past 300 years, this has been the main tactic of atheists. They have tried to set up a conflict between science and religion, a conflict that is not true. The truth is that Christianity itself is responsible for science as we know it. Now, in order to get into this, we need to first understand what science is. So science is not just technology or discoveries. Those are parts of it, later outflows of it. Science, more than anything else, is a mentality. It's a method. We call this the scientific method. So you observe phenomena going on in nature. You come up with a hypothesis of why that may be. You conduct an experiment to test that. And then based on your experiment, you either confirm your hypothesis or you rework it and do another experiment and on and on. That method, that is what we call science. And the truth is that Christianity provided the framework for that method to develop. Christianity provided the framework for science to develop. So why is it that science needed Christianity in order to develop? Well, first we need to go back 2,000 years ago to when Christianity first came on the scene. And at this point, there were many other nations that were much further ahead technologically than Europe at that time. China, Egypt, India, Babylon, the Arab Empire. All of these places had greater technology than Europe at the time of Jesus Christ, but they never developed science. It was only in Christian Europe that science developed. China, Islam, India, ancient Greece, they all had alchemy, but it was only in Christian Europe that alchemy turned into chemistry. Many of these societies had astrology, but again, it was only in Christian Europe that astrology turned into astronomy. So what is it specifically about Christian theology that was essential for the rise of science? I want to highlight three important aspects. Number one, God is rational. Number two, God created the universe. And number three, the universe, the world, is good. Okay, so Christianity depicted God as rational, responsive, dependable, omnipotent, and the universe as God's personal creation. So God is rational. God created the world. Therefore, the natural world is rational. And because of that, it's stable and it's lawful and it's awaiting human comprehension. The world is knowable and reasonable, and therefore it is discoverable. That mindset was so key. Christianity is also monotheistic. Many other religions, there are religions today, and especially during that time, had many gods, and their gods were impersonal. Those cultures did not have the ability to sustain science. Now, I use that key word culture. What is the root of the word culture? It's cult. And the famous British historian Christopher Dawson did a study on all of the cultures throughout history. And he came up with the conclusion that the heart, the root, the core of every culture is religion. Religion is the core and everything else flows out from there. So these cultures did not have the ability to sustain science because of their theological beliefs. They had many gods and their gods were impersonal. Christianity also believed that creation was separate from God. Many gods, many religions during that time, and again today, were pantheistic. They believed that the world is God or parts of the world are God. Now, the problem with this is that the world or parts of the world are God. You can't experiment on the world because then you would be experimenting on God. How absurd is that idea to be able to experiment on the world? But no, for Christianity, the world is God's creation. It's separate from God, and therefore it is natural and it is good to experiment on the world. Christianity depicted the world as God's personal creation. Therefore, knowing more about nature meant we could know more about God. Again, this is a problem with many other religions that don't believe in a creation because they don't believe in a universe with beginning or purpose. And that mindset could not create the conditions in order for science to develop. But on the Christian perspective, the world is good, and therefore it's good to know more about it and to understand it. Christians didn't just happen upon science. They didn't just happen upon investigating more into the natural world. Instead, Christians believed it was a duty to better understand God's creation, because then we could better marvel at God. So think about Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Christians develop science because they believed it should be done, because through science we can better understand God. Now, there's this idea today that there are certain truth claims about science and certain truth claims about religion or any religion or Christianity that are at odds. And that has nothing to do with the Christian mindset. Because from Christianity, God is truth. God is truth itself, and therefore anything that is true cannot be opposed to God because God is truth. That is the true Christian mindset. So the reality is that science is the natural outgrowth of Christian doctrine. And on a much simpler level, Christianity is very practical. The classical period did not have an appropriate model for science, mainly because, for example, with the ancient Greeks, they were way over theoretical. They weren't practical enough. Whereas Christianity had an active interest in the simple occurrences of life, and that mindset led to the further development of science over time. We also know that the Catholic Church invented the university system, and it was in the university system that Christians developed science. Science is the natural outgrowth of Christian doctrine. A simple example of this is the field of physiology. The classical period and Islam would not allow human dissection. So therefore, the field of physiology could have never been created. But Christianity came on the scene, and dissecting the human body was okay in the Christian worldview. Therefore, that allowed for the development of the field of physiology. So a number of people will balk at this idea that Christianity or the Catholic Church invented science, and they'll say, well, during that time, everyone was Christian. So of course, science was developed by Christians. Well, that idea is silly and it's false for a number of reasons. One, it doesn't explain why science only developed in Christian Europe and not in any of those other nations where there wasn't Christianity. Two, science didn't just develop in Christian Europe from lukewarm or on-the-fence Christians who happen to be very smart. No, science developed from the most Christian of all people. It was the priests and the monks. People that had given their lives to the gospel in celibacy. These, by and large, were the people that developed science. So it is not true that Christianity developed science just because everyone at that time was Christian. That's not true at all. It also relies on a false secularization theory that we know today just is not true. So I want to end with highlighting a number of theistic and Christian scientists, because we often hear these names, but unfortunately we don't learn much about them, especially their theological beliefs. So Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein were both very religious. Einstein has a famous quote where he said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Louis Pasteur, a lay Catholic, is the founder of bacteriology and microbiology. Roger Bacon, who was a Franciscan friar, is the one that devised the scientific method. A priest, Father Giambattista Riccolio, is the first person to measure the rate of acceleration of a freely falling body. Another priest, Father Nicholas Steno, is the founder of geology. Father Roger Boscovich, the founder of modern atomic theory. Father Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics. Father George Lemaitre, a Belgian Catholic priest. He's known as the founder and the one who developed the modern Big Bang theory. Robert Boyle was an Anglican who's regarded as the first modern chemist. Everyone's heard of Nicholas Copernicus, or Father Nicholas Copernicus. He was the first to show that the Earth revolved around the moon. And a simple Google search or look on Wikipedia, you could see the list of Catholic and Christian clergy, scientists, lay scientists, and it's very extensive. Now, we don't hear this growing up. And part of the problem is we need to first distinguish between physical scientists and social scientists. So physical sciences, chemistry, biology, physics. These types of scientists, study after study shows, has a very strong belief in God. However, social scientists, psychology, sociology, study after study shows that they have a very low belief in God. Now, much of the literature written on science is not written by physical scientists. It's often written by social scientists, so that these ideas of this incompatibility between science and religion subtly creep in there when the scientists themselves see no conflict between science and religion. So Let us not believe this silly and ridiculous notion that there is a conflict between science and religion, or science and Christianity, or science and Catholicism, however you want to say it. Instead, we should believe the traditional Christian view. So let's go to the beginning of Luke's gospel, where the angel Gabriel appears to Mary, and Mary says, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord." Mary is the handmaid of God. She is an instrument and through which God works to accomplish his purpose. And the traditional Christian belief on the relationship between science and religion, science and theology, is that science is the handmaid of theology. Science is an instrument that God uses to help us better understand him.